Welcome to Extracurricular. I'm Eddie Geller.
And I'm Stephanie Vanos.
You don't have to say it just like me.
Why not?
I feel like that's how I'm saying it. And then, well, okay, I don't want to tell you how to say it, but I don't know. I felt like I was a little imitated.
Are you calling me a copycat?
No, I mean, I guess imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So maybe I should be happy that you were doing it like that. But welcome back to our podcast.
Well, thank you. Welcome back to our podcast.
Are you just going to repeat everything I say? It's going to double the podcast length.
Oh, people are going to be so mad.
They're going to be really angry. We are excited to be back here again today. Stephanie, for the folks who maybe are listening for the first time, what role title do you hold?
I am a school board member for Orange County Public Schools in District 6.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I interrupted you. You are here officially, right? This is an official communication?
Incorrect. I am here unofficially.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm always grateful to be here. We're excited to be back. Today, we're going to talk about charter schools, the religious right in schools, and we're going to talk some broader Democratic Party issues, some schisms going on in the Democratic Party. It feels like we're maybe not in the best place, the Democratic Party. I don't know. Question mark?
I don't know if we're in the best place for the Democratic Party, but we are in a really good place right now. We are actually in the Melrose Center. I do like to refer to it as Melrose Place.
First of all, what an amazing transition. Just an incredible segue. Number two, yes, this is the second time we've recorded this library here in... Which library is this?
This is the downtown branch of Orange County Public Libraries.
Just so folks know, I only moved to Orlando back in January of this year. So I'm not as familiar with all the libraries and what they are, so please forgive me. But that being said, we are greatly appreciative of this wonderful space, the Melrose Center, Melrose Place here at this library, which you can sign up, you can take an orientation, they'll give you access to these very cool spaces. There's a video studio, there's a music recording studio. So when you're ready to record your album, Steph, like we can go here and record it for free.
No, I think that's going to be you with your new potential drum set and what else. But truly, check out the public library system. It is amazing. Not only everything that they have here in the library, but they also deliver books right to your door.
Incredible.
There's a drop in the back, so you don't even have to park and go into the library. You can just drop your books right off in a little, mailbox type situation. It's wonderful.
Maybe I'll ride my bike to the library and drop off my books.
Well, we know you're not going to ride your bike, but nice try.
Nor am I going to read a book.
But the library is great.
The library is wonderful. And I do read books occasionally, not as many as I want to or should. But yes, patronize your library. It's incredible. Many people have made the point that if the idea of a library were introduced today, there's no way they would ever get created or get passed. They would be considered socialism. And I think that is probably true. Like, it's incredible that these exist.
Well, I think they're necessary, but what do you mean? Just because they have a broad array of books, or
because they're free? Because they're this public good that people can just go to this building where anyone can access, regardless of your socioeconomic status, and you can just have access to books, to movies, to TV shows. Here again, you can access this multimedia space that is it's for the public good. Nobody's making money off this thing. And I think, if this idea were just created today, like imagine a bill in Congress where people are like, we want to create these spaces where people could just check out books, and we're going to spend government money to purchase books so anyone can read them and check them out for free. They're just going to borrow them and then bring them back. I think people would laugh that out of Congress, sadly.
Well, you know what's also amazing?
What?
They no longer charge late fees on books.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, they have in the past. I actually had to make it a New Year's resolution one year to not have a late fee on a library book, and I made it through that particular year without having a late fee. Not my strength, but now, there's no late fees. It's just if it's been too long, I guess they either revoke your privileges or they make you pay for the whole book.
Oh goodness! So wait, I should finally feel comfortable to bring back my copy of Hunger Games: Catching Fire without fear of retribution.
Safe harbor.
Safe harbor. I trust you know what you're talking about. You're the lawyer. Let's talk about this week. It's been a lovely week. You have attended your first graduations as a member of the Orange County School Board.
I have. It's been great. I have actually all three of my high schools have kind of the end graduation. So I had one Thursday night, Friday, and I have one this afternoon. I think it's actually the last one for Orange County Public Schools, but it's been really fun. It's shaking a lot of hands. Mm-hmm. The first high school, I think we had about 450.
Oh my goodness!
Yesterday there was over 800 students graduating. But it's exciting. It's such an important day in our students' lives and in their families' lives, and the teachers are proud to see their kids walk across the stage, and really all of the educators are, and it just reminds you, like, this is what it's about. You know what I mean? It's about, educating our youth and just watching them, have fulfilled all of their requirements and accomplished so much and really just grown as people, and just seeing the excitement and happiness and just hearing about their plans for the future is, I don't know, it's just such a great part of it's just a great thing to see. That's beautiful. I mean, you shook so many hands, you will shake a lot more. Oh, an incredible variation of grips, I have to imagine. Like some young kids who want to prove themselves and give you like a nice strong grip, and then I'm sure a lot of like just people like putting their hand out and just like you kind of grabbing it and shaking. True. And I have to say, I'm a smallish person, and so like some of these guys are like, they're like big people. I've got a hearty handshake, and I kind of feel like they bounce me around the stage a little bit. But give me their names. I don't want people bouncing you around the stage. I don't care if they're 18. I will go have a stern conversation with them. But perhaps more disturbing. There's some sweaty hands, but it's okay. That's all good. And we have our hand sand. We hand sand after, and it's all good. But truly, it is. Could you hand sanitize between every handshake? Do you think that would take up too much time? Well, it's funny. My girls were like, well, why don't they just hand sand before they shake your hand? And I'm like, that's nice. Maybe if someone there with a pump, like before you get your diploma, you have to like take your pump and clean your hands. I like it. I like the way they think, but that's not what happens. We shake everyone's hand. That's beautiful. Okay, so we're here a little early morning. Mm-hmm. We normally record later in the day. Yeah, and, by early morning, just so folks know how sad this is for me. We're recording at 11 a.m. So she is being so kind. Well, it's. Yeah. So how are you feeling? Being here this early, how are you feeling this morning? Someone is probably listening to this podcast at like their 5 a.m. run, and they're just so appalled. I'm feeling okay. I've been feeling not the greatest lately. I actually went to the doctor. No one should worry about me. I'm okay. I just have not been feeling my full self. And so whatever that means. And I actually had the doctor, I went through all the things, my doctor and some test results. And also, I just also mentioned I'm vegan because I feel like this is relevant to making sure I'm getting enough vitamins, nutrients, etc. And got asked the dreaded question, which is, how much protein are you getting? Which, is, if anyone asks a vegan in conversation, like, where are you getting your protein or how much protein you're getting, it is the most obnoxious question. But when your doctor is asking you, I felt very on the spot, and I actually sadly have a spreadsheet that I keep somewhat track of like foods I'm eating and the macronutrients in those. And so I rattled off how much protein I'm getting, and she essentially told me I was not getting enough protein, which just feels like, I don't know, it just feels like I'm not representing vegans well, and maybe I need to eat some more beans or tofu or something like that. Did you feel judged? I don't know if I felt judged. There's part of me that thinks, well, why don't you ask me about the cruelty inherent in factory farming and the environmental impacts? But also, I respect the fact that she's a doctor and she's more concerned about my health than the social, political implications of eating animal products. So I guess I respect that. And maybe I need to get some more protein around dinner time, kind of get those numbers up. So we'll see. That's what's next. I'm glad the public is caught up on my on my protein intake. And just for the record, how much protein is in an Aloha bar? I don't remember. And is it bioavailable? Oh my God. Is it bioluminescent? We'll see. Maybe we'll create that. So I want to give a little update because you did actually get a small-ish update last night on the Florida budget,
which we spent a lot of time talking about on this podcast. So can you give the just sort of where we're at right now with the funding and the budget here in Florida?
Yeah, I don't have too much to say. We got this information last night, and I don't think many legislators even knew it was coming down. So I think that this information kind of took them by surprise. But after thinking that this would be yet another week where lawmakers would not be in Tallahassee and the budget would, there would be no decisions made on the budget, I think we know now that there will be budget conferencing happening this week, both Tuesday, Wednesday, and I think a bit of time on Thursday. So there will be some conversations about budget. What are the details of the budget? I do not know. Still trying to, figure out that information. Obviously, I'm very concerned about the impacts on education funding, both just generally for the base student allocation, that's sort of the general funding, but then also for these add-on performance funding for the advanced studies classes. So I'm waiting to hear more information on that, and I will be sharing that information. I know that there are parents and students who are interested in, having their voices heard on these topics, and if there's an opportunity to do that, I would love to bring some of our students and families up to Tallahassee.
Where can people follow you for information on this?
Vote Vanos on Instagram is probably the best place.
That's great. I'm going to start following after we get off this podcast.
Good to know. Thanks.
No, but people should obviously continue to follow you. I mean, there's, lots of other school board members who are being vocal about this and want to give credit to them as well. But obviously, I'm on a podcast with you, so I'm going to promote your page and the work you're doing. But we just have to continue to speak up and make our voices heard as loud as we can for our students and our schools.
Yeah, and I think just for public awareness, too. I think the more that we are out there and the more we're sharing our stories, the more we're hearing from people in our schools about the impact of these cuts on themselves and on their friends and on their peers. I just think that is an important way to kind of share this message of what's happening. And I think that is one role that just everyday people can play, is just to share their stories.
Okay, I want to get into a conversation about charter schools. This is a thing that gets brought up from time to time on our podcast. I know this is a thing that you deal with a lot. And you actually got this list. Someone had sent you a list of a charter school of things that were happening that they were concerned about, a list of 10 things. And we won't necessarily go through everything in that list, but it kind of provided, I think, a reason to talk about this, because I think there's a lot of folks who are listening. There's a lot of folks who do know what a charter school is, but there's other folks who are listening. It was like, what is a charter school? What are people always talking about them? I heard they were good. I heard this, I heard that. So I thought maybe we could do a little bit of a primer on what is a charter school? What is the controversy around them? How does it interact in your work? Can you just explain to folks in the most basic term, what is a charter school and how should they understand it?
Yeah, I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because I feel like we have had a lot of conversations about voucher schools and about the taxpayer-funded voucher program and how we are diverting all of this money over to this parallel, private, unaccountable system. And to a lot of people assume that charter schools are part of the taxpayer-funded voucher program. And there are some similarities, but they are different. A charter school is considered in this state by law a public school. Charter schools get public money. They are funded much the same way that our neighborhood public schools are funded. They are different from a magnet school, though, and that's where a lot of people kind of get confused. Magnet schools are truly part of our sort of neighborhood traditional public school system, and they are governed by our Orange County School Board, and they follow really all of the same rules that our normal public schools do. Charter schools are, in theory, overseen by the Orange County School Board, but they are really governed by their own, usually nonprofit governing board. Charter schools do have some of the same accountability measures that I'll just call them neighborhood public schools do, but they have a lot more flexibility in how they can implement the requirements. And they don't share all of the same sort of restrictions and don't have to follow all of the same regulations that are neighborhood public schools have to follow. And that's usually, having to do with safety or building compliance or the requirements of the, let's say, principals and administrators of the school. So there are just a lot of regulations and rules that they don't have to follow. They have more freedom. Now, why were charter schools created? They were created to kind of introduce innovative practices into education that then our public schools could adopt. So in some ways, people thought of them as pilot schools. Like they were pilot schools, they could try out some, maybe new innovative ways of teaching and learning and then share that with the public school. That's not really what happened. Charter schools really became a business of their own. And I think it really is in many ways. And I want to say, I think there are some charter schools that are doing some good things. My personal belief is if a charter school is meeting an unmet need that a public school cannot meet, then there can be a place for them as long as they're run by all nonprofit entities, including the organization or the company that owns the land that they're on. So there can be a place for them, but I do think it really has become a step in privatizing education, and that is where I get concerned.
Okay, this is really helpful. So me, Mr. Layman, trying to understand, they are public schools, but we've taken the rules away from them. We thought, okay, now these Wild West schools, these Wild West pilot schools, now they can try out all these cool different things. And I think that's why people are jazzed about them. But really what they have turned into, from what you were telling me, is just these kind of funnels for people, organizations to make money, putting money before the students. Not to say that, there's not some concern about making good schools, making good curriculum for children, but the eyes have opened for a lot of folks to make money off these schools, which is not why you're in this work. That's not why the public thinks that teachers and administrators and the public school system is doing this, is to make people money. But that is what is happening in a lot of these cases. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think there's an overall movement to privatize education. And it's funny, when you were talking earlier about a public library is a public good, well, public schools are a public good too. And it's not a business. And I think that in some ways, in many ways, people are trying to make public schools into a business. And it's a public good. And it's just, that's just not the purpose of it. And it's really just not the place, in my opinion, to make money. A lot of times what happens is you'll have, let's say, a real estate investment company will, purchase, or own property. And then you have the management company of the charter school that has to pay for the rental or the lease of the school building and the school building, and so how do they pay that rent, or how do they make those lease payments? That money comes from public taxpayers. So we have public taxpayers that are really funding these schools. And though the charter school can say, well, our management company is a nonprofit, or, our board is a nonprofit, well, the owner of the real estate is often not a nonprofit and is making money off of these lease and rental payments. And charter schools have access to capital funding through our property taxes. So they get a portion of the 1.5 millage rates in Orange County. And they also get state allocated funds. And I can say in the last 10 years, that's been about $63.9 million of PICO money that these charter schools can use to improve their property. Now, what happens when a charter school closes? Orange County Public Schools does not own that property. So any improvements made to that land, to that building, that goes to the owner of the building. So in other words, we are using taxpayer money to really cause appreciation for these buildings, and then the owners are getting these lentil. Oh my goodness, these leaves.
You're trying to get me protein. I appreciate it. You're subconsciously trying to feed me lentils, and I thank you.
Trying to be so efficient. The lease and our rental payments. So so I think that money transfer is really not something to be overlooked. And also just in the general funding through the FEFP, which is how we fund our schools and public schools. Charter schools in the last about 9 years have received about $1.2 billion million through of state allocated money that has flowed through just Orange County and has flowed to these charter schools. And I don't have the stats on how often they close, but I can tell you that in the last, we just had a conversation about this at a recent work session about how many public schools have closed in the last 10 years, 0, and how many charter schools have closed in the last 10 years. And this is actually impactful for Orange County because if you've been following the news at all, we are involved in some litigation with Disney, and we've had to...
Is that why you were a little standoffish during our conversation last week about my trip to Disney?
No, I mean, let's talk about the Princess Complex. That's a conversation for another day. But the Orange County Public Schools has had to withhold money because we know that there's a chance that we are going to have to repay millions, like over $100 million with respect to some litigation that's happening with Disney and sort of the appraised value of some of the properties. And, that's, again, a separate conversation, but it came out that, not all charter schools have been setting aside this money. Ooh. And so not only have they not set aside this money and they may need help financing their funding, which of course we've set aside the money. We haven't been able to pay teachers. We haven't been able to pay for all the things that we want to pay. We've been setting aside this money. These charter schools haven't been doing that. So what happens? But the other piece of that conversation that came out was, what about charter schools who have closed during these last 10 years? So they've received money, right? They've received this taxpayer money. Now they've closed, and now we are on the hook to repay money that they, based on what the determination of this lawsuit is, that they shouldn't have received in the first place. Who's on the hook for it? Orange County Public Schools.
Ugh. Gross. Well, okay, this is one thing a lot of people I think are going to be thinking about. Do charter schools perform better than regular public schools?
There's no evidence that overall they perform better. Some charter schools do have good performance records, but the vast majority of them do not. And there's really no good evidence showing that overall they perform better than our public schools.
So in your opinion, just shooting for the hip, why do people love charter schools so much? Why is there such a fervor for them?
Yeah, I think we've just had this explosion of, school choice in our state. And I think that school choice is something people hear choice and people want more choices, right?
Sure.
We always want more choices. But a lot of times, and this could be said about taxpayer funded vouchers as well, a lot of times what people don't understand is that those choices aren't created out of this separate pot of money.
Yeah.
These choices are created because it is taking money away from something else to create these choices. Right. And so what's interesting is you're diverting funding to our, neighborhood public schools to fund, charters, to fund taxpayer funded voucher programs, while all the time saying that, we have struggling schools and schools should be doing more and they're not doing as much as they could be while they're continuing to siphon off the money. So we just get in this cycle. And again, if there was this pot of money where everyone could be fully funded, we would be having a different conversation. But choices require funding.
And I think it can't be said enough, at least for me, and I know you feel this way, is that our public school system, and I know we kind of already said this, is just this public good, that this is like part of society, is that we have this system in which anyone can get an education, and everyone is provided an education, and it is part of building our community and our school system and students and parents, and it's this real connection. And when we are talking about taxpayer-funded vouchers or we're talking about charter schools, we're starting to chip away at this societal good. We're chipping away at something, this society that we are building through public schools. And so I think that part, I know we kind of, again, already said that, but I think that part can't be discounted. It's trying to it's part of like separating us again and taking from this system where we're saying everyone gets the same thing, everyone has access to this public good, and we're saying, well, people with more money, they can get kind of some better things, some nicer things, and it won't be held accountable, or people can get this other public money and go to their public private schools. I mean, it's all trying to chip away from this thing that we have built and undermine public education, and I just feel like expressing that in that way is important.
No, I think that's such a great point, Eddie. And I also think it's worth saying, listen, could our, neighborhood public schools, could we be doing things in a better way? Could we make changes? Yeah, wouldn't it be great if we could all have smaller class sizes? yeah, let's fund that. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we could pay our teachers more money? Yes, let's fund that. And what you have in the charter school system is they are getting the same funding per student that the traditional public schools, traditional neighborhood public schools are getting, but they don't have the same funding requirements. And so they have extra money to spend on, different resources for students. And it's funny that the public school system doesn't have because of, these unfunded mandates that we have to comply with different requirements. We have to spend our money on certain things that they don't. And so we get the same amount, but we are required to spend money on, on certain safety measures, the retirement system, on, increases in teacher pay that they don't have to do. Again, these are things that we want, but we have restrictions on our money that they don't have on theirs, so they can choose to spend it in different ways, really however they want. So yeah, if we want to make changes, there are things that I think we should have. We should have smaller class sizes. We should relook at how we are judging our student performance and how we are evaluating teachers. But let's do that by, legislatively and through our budget allocations.
It's like your neighborhood public schools are like the stern, responsible parent, and then charters and private schools are like the parent that lets you do whatever you want, and just like will always say yes and give you money. And so like the regular public schools are like over here, like we're trying to keep things together and making sure and just being responsible and making sure like the bills get paid and everything happens the way that it's supposed to. And then the other parent is just like, fuck it, like, we'll waste money. We don't care. We're the cool schools.
I love it. So you've said it in a way that people understand. And I do want to say this, like there are a couple of good charter schools in my district. And what I want to do, let's look at what they're doing and let's think about what we can use from their experiences and like bring that into the public school system, or, find a way to actually, all benefit from some of the things that they're trying.
Well, and I think what happens, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a lot of times those innovations happen and people are like, oh, charter schools are better.
Yes.
That's what we should be doing, instead of what you're saying. And what I could not agree more with was like, let's take those innovations and yes, bring them to everyone, bring them to the public school system so all of us can enjoy these benefits. But people have ulterior motives about building a different set of education for people who are wealthier and have more means, et cetera, and want to make money off schools too.
100%.
Thank you. And this transitions well because there have been stories in the last couple of weeks about religion making their way into public schools. And this is obviously not a new conversation, but I think we are in this new administration, in this new regime, and I think folks who are trying to break down the wall between religion and public schools are feeling more emboldened, are feeling more empowered to try and bring Christianity into schools. And you sent me this article about Texas advances bills for Bible 10 Commandments in public schools. A set of bills awaiting Governor Greg Abbott's, again, this is Texas, Greg Abbott's signature are among the latest in a wave of state legislation nationwide testing the separation of church and state. What is your reaction to this? What are you seeing on the ground? Is this a thing that is also happening in Florida?
Okay, this bill requires every classroom to display the 10 Commandments.
Bananas.
I don't even know what I literally have no words for this. This is saying in our public schools, students have to sit in a classroom and there's signs for how big there's requirements for how big the sign has to be. And they have to sit there and look at the 10 Commandments for, 7 hours every day. I have no words for this. I think this is extremely frightening. We've seen this rise of Christian nationalism, and it's attempt to infiltrate our public schools, and I find it very disturbing. And I know, and I want to sort of just point out at the beginning of this conversation, so that I'm very clear that Christian nationalism is not Christianity.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think there's a difference between practicing your beliefs and respecting other people's beliefs and what this is, which is trying to just merge Christianity and American society and American public institutions. I just like the idea of a student sitting in class looking at you shall not commit adultery day in and day out. I mean, it's just like, it's so, I mean, this is a little far afield, but it's just so bizarre. You're learning math and science, and then you shall have no other gods before me. I mean, it's just, it's wild. That's not what public spaces, public schools are for. But that's not how these folks, these Christian nationalists, see it. They want these two things to be merged. We're talking about public schools being this public good where we as a society bring everyone together and have this shared value of equal education, equal opportunity. And for them, it's like, yes, let us create this shared space where we all believe in a Christian God together and follow his commandments together. And that is their idea of merging this. And it is so gross. And I wholeheartedly, if the 10 commandments are what you live by, I could not more fully support you, but please keep it out of our public schools.
Right. And I think, whenever these types of bills or whenever, these Christian nationalism, because there have been so many different attempts to try to infuse this in our school system. And some of them are through bills. Honestly, some of them are through curriculum. I mean, the last round, I believe it was of social studies standards when they went through the reviews, in God there were just so many examples. There were just so many examples in those revisions of trying to infuse Christian nationalism into our curriculum. And people really didn't know that this process was happening. Everyday people didn't know. And I think we just have to pay attention. But what I do find heartening in this conversation is, and I was honestly very surprised by it, but the number of religious groups that stood up and said, we do not support this. Christian, Jewish, Islamic, different religious groups that came in and said, we do not support this. We do not believe that, religion belongs in our public education. And it was for many reasons. I think it's out of a respect for people who have different religious beliefs than their own. I think that's a big part of it. But I think another part of it, and I think this is powerful, is that, when it comes down to religion versus state power, right? State power can use religion to get traction, to get followers, to kind of build them. But when it comes down to the end, right, state power is always going to win over religion. And they know that. And so they're at risk. You may think that, this is helping to build you up. But at the end of the day, I would argue that religion is being used to further powerful interests. Oh,
I think that is extremely well stated. Also, it makes me think, what if we were trying to bring Judaism mandated into public schools? And I'm just imagining the week of school lunches during Passover where there's no buns for the chicken sandwiches, which are also unbreaded. There's no cookies, and all these public school students have to eat matzah for a week. I don't think anyone would be very happy with that. Shouts to my practicing Jews and love a good matzah. Well, like a good matzah. But just like, of course, if it was any other religion other than Christianity, they would flip. Like the idea of celebrating Ramadan or any other celebration that isn't a Christian one would make them flip. Of course, that hypocrisy is not relevant to them because for them, this is a Christian nation. And so, of course, we would have the 10 Commandments up in a classroom. And it's disturbing, it's bizarre, and it needs to be called out as gross because it is.
It is. And it's actually a great segue to the Supreme Court case that was, I guess, deadlocked 4-4 not long ago regarding the nation's first religious charter school. And this was out of Oklahoma. And it was that Oklahoma will now not be able to launch the nation's first religious public charter school after this decision that was sort of based on the separation of church and state. But what I found really interesting about it, and I'm actually scrolling through right now, is the attorney general who brought this case found himself, he's Republican, and he found himself opposite of many of the other Republicans in the state who backed the idea of this religious charter. And the way that he defended his position, I'm just going to read this because it was so interesting.
Please.
He said, Drummond, who is running for governor, said in a statement that the decision was, quote, a resounding victory for religious liberty that would ensure that taxpayer money would not go towards radical Islamic schools, as well as the Catholic school at issue at this case.
Yeah.
And so, that seems to be I think that really just shows this for what it is,
Yeah.
that this is about Christian nationalism. It's about Christianity. It's not about religion. It's not about, we're just trying to promote everyone's ability to exercise their religion. It's about promoting a particular religion, and that we have to scare people, literally like scare, and I'm using that in quotes, scare people that if we allow this to happen, other religions that are not Christianity might get a foot in the door, and we can't have that.
Right. They're going to have to eat that matzah, those kids.
Exactly.
Strawberry milk and matzah. Thank you for walking us through that. For our last subject today, I want to talk about more of a kind of national issue. So we're out there in the trenches. We're reading the blogs. We're reading the Axios headlines. We're staying abreast of the national conversations about what's happening in the Democratic Party and what are the conversations about how this party is being rebuilt. There's a lot of talk about winning back men. The left's Joe Rogan, which obviously that's what we're doing. We're the Joe Rogan podcast of the left. I mean, I think that's pretty explicit at this point. But also I think there's this interesting conversation, and for folks who listen to Ezra Klein's podcast, or maybe it's read his new book and he's not the only one talking about this, but this conversation about abundance. And what this is essentially, and I'm distilling a lot of work and academic thought into a quick soundbite, so please forgive me if you are one of these authors. But essentially, the Democratic Party should orient itself around building more things and making it easier to build essentially houses and infrastructure. And the other part of that is that we need to roll back a lot of the regulation and red tape and permitting that happens on a local and state level that keeps us from building things. So Joe Biden passes the Inflation Reduction Act. We have these billions of dollars to build everything from rural broadband to new chip factories. But a lot of this stuff just can't get built, doesn't get built, is being delayed. Again, because all of this sort of red tape, regulations, things being tied up in the court. And essentially what the abundance folks are saying, Ezra Klein, Derek Thompson, other folks are saying, we need to roll this stuff back. We need to be a party that's going to build things. We have a housing crisis in this country among our many crises, and that's where we need to orient themselves. And there's folks on the other side who say this red tape, environmental regulations and reviews are good things, and that we need to hold them strong. And we can't just start going around all our permitting and regulations so we can start building whatever. That's how harm is going to happen, which I think is a very valid point. I think this is an interesting conversation to be had. I find myself, and I'm curious, Steph, what you think, and I will ask you momentarily, but I think we are absolutely in a housing crisis. As someone who is a renter, I do not know when I will be able to buy a home. I think there's a lot of folks who are my age, younger and older, who have no idea when that will ever be possible. And homes are not the only part of it, but I think that is one of the biggest issues we think about when we talk about this subject and talking about whether we can build things. And I think we need more housing. We need updated infrastructure. So I am very sympathetic to this argument about the Democratic orienting itself around an idea of abundance, which, just to say explicitly, a lot of the progressive side is very skeptical of this argument. And I ran as a progressive. I still very much consider myself a progressive. And I think we absolutely need to be taking on big corporate power and big money. But I kind of feel like, why not both? But that's kind of where I'm sort of thinking about it. I'm curious, Steph, your reaction to these kind of bigger picture issues of the Democratic Party.
Well, first of all, your summary was so good. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I don't know if Ezra Klein would agree, but
I mean, it's better than mine, because I would have said, and he may have said this himself, like I would have said Ezra Klein is basically just saying get shit done. And I think kind of the opposition to this abundance argument, which P.S. I mean, kudos to Ezra Klein that we are now calling it like the abundance
and
argument.
his co-author Derek Thompson. There are a couple other people who've written about this. So I mean, I think he is the most public-facing person. But I just wanted to give that caveat.
But that's the name of his book, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, Derek Thompson was his co-author, so I'm just we got to credit
Derek Thompson. I appreciate you too.
We got to give credit to all the men. Okay. Okay.
Right, correct. So I think, so that's sort of on the one side. And I think the opposition that has sort of arisen to this is just so interesting. I think it's, from how I understand it, they're sort of saying like, listen, having these regulations are important because that's what enables citizens and just sort of everyday people to kind of come in and raise questions about what's happening and kind of gives more power to the people to kind of stop I'll just say developments or building or whatever it is from happening because of other concerns.
And lots of harm has been, like, immeasurable amounts of harm has been done by development, et cetera, that has ignored pollution concerns, ignored, racial concerns about how we're building housing and infrastructure. So these things exist for good reason, safety concerns. So, I think and obviously you're not brushing those off, but like, I don't think an abundance argument brushes those off. And also we have to acknowledge these things can happen. But anyway, sorry, I interrupted you again.
No. And I think part of it too is something that I know we've talked about is, that these sort of activists, sort of citizen groups, I mean, they also form larger groups, right, which have had a big influence on the Democratic Party. And, some believe that their mere existence helps to build power, on the left. And so I guess I think there are, I will say yes and for both of them, right? Like, yes, we need to get shit done. And also we need to be smart and considerate about how we're doing it and making sure that people still have a voice. So I'm just curious to hear more conversation about it. I mean, I think questions I would want to know is what does build power? Like, is it the power of kind of the interest groups, and do they support each other in a way that does build intersectional power? Or, is there a compelling argument that like, we just need to get shit done? And so I don't know, do you have thoughts about that? Or have you read any polling that might suggest Americans are more favorable towards certain arguments?
Well, this organization, Demand Progress, which actually I worked for Demand Progress for a couple of months, so I appreciate them and like them as an organization. Actually did a poll and found out that Democratic voters preferred an anti-corruption message over an abundance message. Now, I think take these things with a grain of salt, and I think Demand Progress probably has their reasons for running that poll. And you can always talk about how questions are worded, but I think going to your point about yes and is I think we can have both. That being said, I do think the desire for justice in some way, shape, or form is important and inherent in a political party. And let me sort of pull back a little bit what I mean. I think talking about fighting crime is always a very popular message. Right now on the right, obviously they are trying to round up and deport and are sadly doing an incredible, deviously, maliciously, disgustingly effective job deporting people. So I think there is something in our hearts and lizard brains about wanting to hold people accountable. And I think for us on the left, it's about we want to hold big corporations. We want to hold the powerful people accountable. And I think what the right has done for a long time is how do they hold smaller individuals accountable, which is not necessarily a bad thing if it's directed towards people who are committing crime. I don't like crime. I would just want to be on the record. I am against crime, which is all to say that I think the party does have to have a message about holding someone accountable. And I think big corporations and big money is an appropriate place to put our ire and to be part of our platform and to be part of what we are fighting for. We're not just running to build things, but I do think we also got to build things. I was thinking about this and thinking about the Jetsons the other night and how fun that was as a kid to watch that show and thinking about this future of flying cars and Rosie and all that stuff. It's the only Jetsons reference I can remember off the top of my head. But think about it. I can't think of any other piece of art right now that imagines some sort of utopian future that's been made in the recent past. Like the idea, this might be a little heady for extracurricular, but there is nothing fun about imagining the future at this moment. I mean, other than the people in our lives. Like I am excited about our future. I'm excited about the future for my family, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, the future that society is building, I don't know what painting that picture looks like in a positive way. And I think we need to create a positive vision for what that looks like, because the vision that Donald Trump and his administration are painting is, let's slash funding for everything under the sun. Let's have a barely functioning government, and people with private money can build their own schools. They can have their own transportation. That is the future they want. And I think Democrats need to paint a picture of abundance, where we are building great things, where we have wonderful infrastructure and walkable cities. And I wish I was more of a traveler, but I'm guessing if I was more of a traveler, I might go to South Korea or somewhere else and be like, oh my God, look at what they can build. Look at what the public can look like when we invest in it, and we want to create a society of abundance. Well, I talked a long time. Sorry. And also thank you. Do you have any reaction to any of that?
No, I love it. I have so many reactions, but I've lost them along the way. One is that I've never seen the Jetsons, so I can't appreciate any of those references. Are they people that get around in like little spaceship type things? Or we can talk about that another time. But I will say this. I do agree that I would agree that both parts of this conversation need more details. Mm-hmm. So yes, let's have what does a unified plan look like for rebuilding our cities and making places more walkable and investing in green tech, green industry and technology in a smart way that will help everyone. Let's make sure that we're funding scientific reresearch. You know what I mean?
God.
That
yes, please.
And that we're really investing in public education, because those things are so important. So I agree with that. And also, I would like to know that when we say things like, let's hold big corporations and big money accountable, like, what does that mean? Like, what exactly does that look like? And I think people like, our local Anna Eskamani, Maxwell Frost have done a really good job of saying exactly what that means. Mm-hmm. It means like these are the tax, we need to make sure that they are paying what they need to be paying in taxes to support the infrastructure that supports their business. Like, that all makes sense. But I do think throwing just the words out there, holding big companies accountable, that just doesn't do that much for me. Like, what do you mean by that? You know what I mean? Like, are we like bringing people off to jail, like hauling people off to jail? Does it mean we're making them, that we are, closing loopholes in the tax system? Does it mean we are that we want laws that better support our employees? Does that mean, like, what does that mean? I want details. I think both sides could, and I don't even say both sides. I think both conversations could use some more details.
Well, I think we also live in a country where it is just presumed that corporations and those with money get away with whatever they want and will not be held accountable for their actions. I think, without diving deep into this, because candidly, I don't want to talk more about it, but the assassination of the CEO of United Health.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, I think there's a reason that, like, to be candid, there was such a fervor and excitement around that, which is so gross. And yet you don't forgive it, but you understand people saw that as a moment where someone who is powerful faced some kind of justice. And to be clear, that is not the type of justice I would ever want for us. And I think that leads us down such a dark, dangerous, scary road. So I think you're right. I think we do need to articulate these things better, but I think people know in their gut that powerful people, that corporations get to run roughshod. They get to spend unlimited amounts in our elections. They get to flout laws. They get to do whatever they want, and they'll get a slap on the wrist from the government and, keep doing their business.
Such an excellent point. I think it's that access. Like, they have access that everyday people don't have. And I think a lot of it just comes down to that too. I do want to go back to one thing, because I think it is important when you talked about that survey. I want to read the questions. I want to read the wording of the questions, because I think that is important. So I'm just going to read this. This is from Axios. So it says, it defined the abundance argument by starting off with this sentence, quote, "The big problem is bottlenecks that make it harder to produce housing, expand energy production, or build new roads and bridges," end quote. And the populist argument was described as, "The big problem is that big corporations have way too much power over our economy and our government," end quote. I do not like the way those questions were worded. I at all.
Yeah,
and,
no,
and,
no,
I,
no.
and I'm not. This is not saying that I'm more. I'm a yes and. I think that
Look
I
at you.
understand.
You're an
See, I
improviser now.
practically am. You know, I could do the show. It's fine. So I think there's important points made on both sides. What I'm hoping is that we can find the parts of both arguments and we can put them together rather than sort of creating sides where like, no, we don't want to hear anything about the abundance argument. No, we don't want to hear anything from the quote, the groups.
Yeah.
Like, how do we work together to create a stronger party that it honestly resonates with more people?
Okay, I love this conversation. I want us to keep having it. These are things that I know you're very interested in. I'm very interested in. I think as we get to the midterms and then we get into the presidential primary, there's going to be candidates who are articulating visions that take from one or hopefully, to your point, both of these things and hopefully can synthesize them, because I do think it's going to be part of both. So we're going to see how this continues to develop. I want to continue talking about it because I think it's important conversations to have. But we're going to wrap it up for today. This has been such a lovely conversation, as always. Do you have any, I love to ask, do you have any parting thoughts for our listeners?
Well, the one thing is we didn't get to talk about Mission Impossible. So maybe next episode we can share some thoughts.
Our full review of The Final Reckoning. Spoilers, maybe not our favorite Mission Impossible.
True.
Well, thank you so much for being here for this conversation today. I'm Eddie Geller. Geller Ed on Instagram if you want to follow.
I'm Stephanie Vanos. Vote Vanos on Instagram.
You definitely want to follow. I know I'm going to be clicking that follow button right after this podcast ends. Thank you so much for listening.
Well, thank you. And Eddie, let's get you some more protein this week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.